There are other losses of carbon from ecosystems besides respiration. Net ecosystem carbon balance includes these in calculations of carbon balance for ecosystems. Net ecosystem carbon balance is the net rate of carbon accumulation by an ecosystem. So net ecosystem carbon balance is abbreviated NECB, which is still a mouthful to say, and it's that net rate of carbon accumulation by an ecosystem. And what's unique about NECB is that it includes all the gains and losses, including disturbances. So often when we're thinking about net ecosystem exchange, net ecosystem productivity, those losses are just going to be from respiration. But ecosystems, when we're thinking about how much carbon they accumulate, can lose carbon due to things like fire, for example. And that, for some purposes, needs to be included in our understanding of the patterns of carbon accumulation. So here's a schematic that shows the major components of net ecosystem carbon balance. These are the fluxes that determine net ecosystem production. These are shown in bold. So GPP, respiration by plant, and heterotrophic respiration. But there's other fluxes both in and out from the ecosystem. So if we use this box as representing the ecosystem, there are other fluxes too. So for example, fires can mineralize carbon and also generate soot, and you'll have losses of carbon due to fires. In addition, you can have methane fluxes that can leave ecosystems, but also some ecosystems are a net sink for methane or volatile organic compounds. So in this case, there's additional fluxes that aren't accounted for just by taking a look at NEP or NEE. There's also leaching of carbon associated with dissolved inorganic carbon and dissolved organic carbon out of the system. As water leaves the system, it's going to have inorganic carbon in it, such as bicarbonate, for example, and also dissolved organic carbon, so the brown stuff in water. That should be taken into account when we're thinking about how much carbon the system is accumulating. Now, this is a relatively simple diagram, and these diagrams can get a lot more complex. This is just an overview of the carbon fluxes of an ecosystem. And again, if we start to make a schematic of this box represents the ecosystem, and there's carbon import to the ecosystem and losses that are shown at the ecosystem level, then a whole host of other processes that occur. Now, this is not a diagram that you can memorize, but you should at least be able to go through it and understand each of the different components and make sure you understand why there are losses from ecosystems. So here, for example, plant respiration and microbial respiration, as well as animal respiration, generate CO2, which are lost from ecosystems. In addition, once we start to include humans, fossil fuel emissions are important for thinking about fluxes of carbon from ecosystems. Fires are a major disturbance that generates CO2, and it's also losses of carbon, but we also have to think about methane losses too. So here's the leaching losses that we talked about before, for example, and other sources of carbon export. Changes in plant biomass, soil organic matter, and animal biomass are associated with net ecosystem carbon balance. So again, when we take a look at this is just some of the complexity that ecosystem ecologists have to deal with in doing the accounting of carbon in ecosystems. So if we want to know if an ecosystem is gaining or losing carbon, in many situations, we have to get parameters. We have to be able to parameterize each of these, find numbers for each of these boxes and each of these fluxes. That can take a lot of work. It's not simple, but questions of the magnitude or importance of carbon acquisition and storage in ecosystems require us to do all of this work.